All right, we're going to go ahead and get started, everyone. I want to thank everyone for tuning in tonight. Today, we're going to have the Armenian American Mental Health Association's Panel 1. This is the first one of our series of panels that we're going to have. And so to get started, our topic for tonight is going to be our topic for tonight is going to be on opinions on psychology, parental love and affection, intergenerational trauma, and somatization. My name is Dr. Parental. I'm going to be presenting the presenters tonight. I'm going to be hosting and introducing everybody, so we could just jump right into it. After each presentation, we will have a couple minutes to ask questions for the presenters, and each presentation will run about 15 to 17 minutes long. So first up, we have our presenters, Carolina Minasian, Elia Kappa, and Yeva Grigoryan, who are going to be presenting on the opinions on psychology of the Armenian diaspora. So whenever you're ready.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for having us. We are ABSS and today we will be presenting on opinions on psychology. Now, this is the ABSS Executive Board. Not every member could make it, but we will be introducing ourselves who are here today. My name is Elia Kappa and I'm the president of ABSS.
Hi everyone, my name is Yeva Grigoryan and I'm the vice president of ABSS.
Hello, my name is Carolina Minasian and I am the secretary of ABSS.
So just a little bit about ABSS. Armenian Behavioral Science Students is a student-led group that uses diverse social media platforms inspired by the already established organization, Armenian Behavioral Science Association, to promote behavioral sciences for students of Armenian ancestry. And our mission these past couple of years has been to find creative and interactive ways to increase educational opportunities for students of Armenian ancestry, while we create a safe space to destigmatize various mental health challenges in the community. We've accomplished a few things in the last few years while ABSS has been active. We've conducted and presented student-led research projects at 5 international conferences. We've organized 9 educational webinars with distinguished professors, authors, and other student groups. We've raised over $4,000 through chess tournaments and crowdfunding to support individuals' mental health in Armenia and Artsakh. We've spread awareness about mental health crisis through a video project. We've represented our organization at the 2023 Armenian National Youth Forum and gained attention through national media sources such as the Armenian Weekly and the Armenian Mirror Spectator. Enough about us. Now we're going to present our most recent research project, Opinions on Psychology. Take it away.
So a little bit about our abstract. So our study looked at how Armenians perceive psychology and whether those views change based on factors like age, gender, education, or work and student status. It is important to note that it was a collaboration between ABSS and Dr. Harold Takushin from Fordham University. We're very inspired by the work that he did with his survey, and we wanted to sort of recreate that and add a little bit of our own spin on it. To gather responses, we distributed a Google form to 68 Armenians living in different countries. And we offered the survey in English, Armenian, and Russian to reach a broader audience. Our participants were asked to decide whether various psychology-related statements were true or false, and they were able to rank it in 5 different ways, which I'll be able to get into. And one of our key findings was that people who had taken more psychology courses, especially students, tended to score significantly higher, showing a stronger understanding of psychological concepts. So a little bit about our surveys. So our survey, we made sure to have a description that was both in English, Russian, and Armenian. And we made it sure to include questions about gender, age, and whether they were a student or not. And this played a really big role in our survey, which I'll explain. So a little bit about our sample questions. I mentioned how we were inspired by Dr. Harold Takushian's survey that he had distributed before. So we sort of took our own spin on it, added a few questions, took a few questions out, and made sure to really gear it towards what we were interested in finding out about sort of our audience. So one of the sample questions was, by studying abnormality in others, psychologists are more likely to develop their personal problems. We made sure that the answers were agree, neutral, somewhat disagree, and disagree, just so that there was a little bit of variance and it wasn't just a blanket statement of yes or no. And on to Carolina.
So looking at our data, we had a total response of 68 people, and we to analyze our data, we use a chi-square test, which is basically a statistical tool used to analyze different categorical data and create relationships that could be statistically significant or statistically not significant based off of two or more variables. Within our test, we tested things such as age, gender, if they were a student, work, or if they've been in therapy, over 5 different broad categories such as wisdom, science, influence, health, and our overall well-being. Just to get into this, as we'll get into it a little bit more deeply later, but as like a kind of analysis of this graph, you can see that the most significant findings that we saw were the number of psychology courses taken had a strong positive correlation with the influence of 0.032, and the overall scores had a 0.307, which suggested that the greater exposure to psychology can enhance like oneself and their personal impact and development. Student status also correlated positively with wisdom and science, showing that both were statistically significant. And something that we found that was interesting within our data is that students also engage more deeply in reflective and academic thinking. And, we'll get more deeply into this, but we theorize that this is because students are more actively engaged in an academic setting. And looking more deeply at our, looking more deeply into our data, students versus wisdom had a correlation coefficient of 0.29, which suggested a weak positive correlation. Being a student suggests a higher wisdom score, and we realized this because the weak positive correlation between a student and higher wisdom scores may be because students are exposed to critical thinking and diverse learning as they are in different types of settings for school and different subjects, and also using different parts of their brains. Additionally, the measure of wisdom in this study might emphasize traits like openness and adaptability, which are often cultivated in an academic setting. Psychology courses versus influence was our strong positive correlation, having a correlation coefficient of 0.332. And an individual who takes more psychology courses, the higher their influence score is. And we found this because the positive correlation between the number of psychology courses taken and the influence suggests that learning psychology may improve different interpersonal skills, cognitive functions, and different persuasive abilities. And additionally, those people who ended up participating in a psychology course may have been inclined towards understanding human behavior more and really naturally exhibited higher influence and higher opinions of psychology. And psychology courses versus overall suggested, again, a positive correlation. And an individual who takes more psychology courses, the higher their overall score is. And this is based off of many different age groups. And we had a moderate positive correlation here, but it indicated that individuals who take more psychology courses tend to achieve higher overall scores. And this is possibly because psychological education fosters skills like self-reflection and analytical thinking. And despite the age group, a lot of people who are interested in this type of human behavior oftentimes will be giving psychology courses and the idea of psychology and a higher overall score despite their age. And yeah.
So, a little bit about our hypotheses. So, our null hypothesis was that there was no linear relationship between the variables, and our alternative hypothesis is that there is a significant linear relationship between the variables. Regarding the assumptions check for randomness, the data collection aimed for variety, though there may have been some limitations, and I'll get more into that shortly. Regarding independence, each sample is less than 10% of the population, so we can reasonably assume independence. And for normality, our sample size is 68, which is greater than 30, so by the central limit theorem, the distribution is approximately normal. Regarding some potential biases, there may have been undercoverage bias since not all countries or regions were represented equally in our sample. And we also acknowledge possible convenience bias, as some participants may have been selected based on access rather than randomness. And we just wanted to explain why the study was really important for us. It was important because it provided valuable insight into how cultural background, specifically within the Armenian community, shapes beliefs about psychology. It showed how exposure to psychology education can influence people's understanding of psychological concepts, which is very helpful for improving educational programs in our community. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you to our presenters. We'll now be taking any questions. So I'm going to be tuning in to see if there are any questions in the chat. And we're just going to give people a couple moments. All right, it looks like there are no questions at the moment. We might be able to address some of those questions at the end of the presentations as well as we get them in the live chat. So thank you again to our first presenters. We're now going to be moving on to Expressions of Love in Armenian Iranian Immigrant Families, a Cross-Cultural Examination of Parental Affection and Attachment by Armen. And Armen is going to present next. So Armen, do you want to get your presentation set up?
Yeah, it's ready. I just have to share, I think.
Perfect. Okay.
Oh, sorry. So hello everyone. I'm Armen Garbetian, and my research is on parental love and attachment in Armenian Iranian families. I chose this research because immigrant family dynamics are often misunderstood through a Western lens. As we know, psychology is usually looked at through a Western lens. So I wanted to look at it in different ways to see expressions of love that vary across different cultural contexts, and also Armenian Iranian families represent a very unique case study because they have traditions from Armenian culture, they have traditions from Iranian culture, as well as some new traditions that they have adopted in the US when they have immigrated to the US. So there's a very unique identity that they have. So it is it is important to have a study on that identity. And another reason I did this study was because there has been very limited to no research that has been done on this population. The ones that I've been looking, there's no empirical studies done on this population. There's studies done on Iranians, there's studies done on Armenians, but not Armenian Iranians, which the focus of the study is. So the objectives of this research is examining how Armenian Iranian parents express their love and warmth, and also investigate how children interpret and internalize these expressions of love. It also explores how these dynamics can shape attachment and emotional development of both children, and also the effect that it has on the parents as well. So some of the key theoretical frameworks that I looked at during this research was attachment theory, PDT, which is parent development theory, and PAR theory, which is parental acceptance and rejection theory. I also looked at some facets that could impact parental love and affection, and the amount of affection that children receive from their parents, which is implicit types of love versus explicit love, cultural transmission and acculturation when parents with the children immigrate to the U.S. Like, how are they acculturating? How are they transmitting their own traditions to the children, and how is that affecting the warmth that the children receive from the parents? Another thing that I looked at was emotional well-being and interpersonal relationships that occur within families and family dynamics of Armenian Iranians. So the broader significance of the study is to help clinicians that do not have familiarity with this population to have a better understanding of their culture, and it helps to help them to have a culturally responsive clinical practice. It also enhances the understanding of bicultural identity and emotional development. And it also helps us move from a more Western lens of psychology, Western framework of psychology, and look into more non-Western perspectives. Yeah. So the literature review that I've looked at for this research was the historical and diasporic context of Armenian Iranians. Armenians are a population that are shaped by migration, shaped by genocide, wars, and political upheavals from the mainland. And Armenians have been present in Iran for over 400 years when they were forcefully migrated in 1600s. They have gone through lots of adaptations and cultural resilience and lots of discrimination because of their language, because of their unique religion. But they have been very resilient population in Iran. They have been able to preserve their culture and language for over 400 years. And migration in the U.S. From Armenians in Iran mostly occurred during or after the 1979 Iranian Islamic Revolution, and also the Iran and Iraq war that happened after it. So lots of Armenians fled from Iran and went back to Armenia, or in many cases came to the US, mostly in the LA area, which has formed a very large diaspora, which has been focused on cultural preservation. So some of the cultural factors on Armenians is that Armenians and Iranians are both from a collectivist culture. Collectivist culture means that there's an emphasis on family loyalty. There's a shared decision making between family members. There's emotional interdependence, and there's also less independence of the people within the collectivist culture, meaning that whenever someone wants to make a decision, they have to run it through their family members and make sure that everyone's on the same page. And their decision could impact family dynamics and family relationships. So it's very important that they are able to be interdependent in a collectivist culture. Gender norms and family roles that I've looked at for this study was that there's traditional gender roles still persisting. This is based on a study that was looking at Armenian people in Armenia. So traditional gender roles, meaning men are caregivers and men are providers and women are caregivers, and there's shifts in gender expectations among younger generations. So this is more of a traditional view, and in younger generations there is more modern view of gender roles, such as like equal rights for men being both caregivers and providers, as well as women helping with providing and financially supporting the family. And more modern views are seen in urban areas and younger generations rather than rural or older generations in the country of Armenia. And in the same study, it was found that grandparents are usually also involved in caregiving. In lots of cases, grandparents live uh, in the same household in Armenia, and also sometimes even when they immigrate, grandparents stay with the main family to help with caregiving and like cooking and caring for the children. So parenting styles and family dynamics of this population, Armenian Iranians, their parenting styles could range from authoritarian to authoritative. Parenting styles, as I talked about before, the enmeshment is common, which means that there's blurred boundaries between the family members, and there's lots of emotional interdependence, making it hard for individuals to be more independent within the family and be able to do their own thing without talking to other family members and making sure that everyone in the family is happy and uh, not in conflict. And warmth is also often implicit in these families, meaning that love is usually shown through actions such as cooking, caring for people, and making sure that they're okay, rather than like words of affirmation or physical touch, which is more common in Western cultures. And authoritarian styles, which is viewed negatively in Western cultures, may be viewed positively in collectivist cultures based on the studies that I've looked at. Authoritarian parenting, which is more harsh parenting without it shows less warmth and more order. It shows respect. It shows like family loyalty, and it helps preserve many of the traditional cultural aspects of Armenian families. Although authoritative parenting in Western culture is seen as as the best type of parenting, which is more warmth and at the same time more order, which is associated with better emotional and psychological outcomes for the children that have authoritative parents. So one of the theories that I looked at was attachment theory. In this theory, there's four types of attachment styles. There's secure, anxious, avoidant, and disorganized. Secure attachment is usually linked to the most positive outcome for the children. It's linked to more consistent and emotionally available caregiving. So when the parents are more available for the children, they're always there for their needs. The child feels more secure, and it correlates with lots of positive outcomes for the children in the future and their relational development with others and when they're adults. And the other ones, anxious, avoidant, and disorganized, also sometimes negatively correlate with feelings of not being enough or feeling of insecurity when they become adults. And cultural context also can alter interpretation and expressions of attachment in different families, which was why I was looking at this through Armenian Iranian cultures. So the other theory that I looked at was PAR theory, which is parental acceptance and rejections theory. This theory talks about how perceived parental acceptance or rejection could be linked to emotional outcomes for the children. So if a child is rejected by their parents from a young age, it correlates with internalizing or externalizing symptoms and behavior in youth, which could be negative. Internalizing, like they could get depression or anxiety, or externalizing, they could have anger issues and become an angry person. And there's lots of cross-cultural evidence that supports the universality of par theory in general. And the last theory that I looked at was parent development theory, or PDT. This theory talks about how parenting could evolve over time, and it adapts based on different contexts. And I use this theory for this research because I wanted to see the effect of immigration on parents and how immigration could change parenting over time. And in the research, I looked at different types of love and how culture is important in different types of love. In individualistic cultures, love is usually expressed verbally and physically, as I talked about before. So lots of words of affirmation, lots of physical touch like hugging, kissing is common in individualistic cultures, while those types of love could be seen more negatively in collectivist cultures, like its overt showing of love is not seen as much in a positive light in most collectivist cultures in the research that I looked at. So because of that, love is usually expressed indirectly, such as like sacrifice and service, like driving someone that needs your help, doing something that someone could benefit from, or like cooking for them, financially supporting them, without expressing that they love you. They will do things for you to show that you are loved. So Armenian, Iranian tend to be in collectivist cultures. That's why they may use implicit styles to show their love and affection to their children. Immigration and acculturation. So migration could alter parenting styles and value systems. So there might be lots of tensions between the traditional views of parents that came from the country of origin, like having Iranian Armenian cultures, and also clash between the Western norms that is more things that are more normal in the U.S. So there might be a clash in that. So parenting could also be influenced by stress, socioeconomic status, and adaptation demands. So, like, if the parent isn't able to speak the language in the new country, it would cause them to have stress and also cause them to have, in many cases, lower socioeconomic status. So, challenges that are faced by parents that influence warmth, as I talked about, socioeconomic stress and financial hardship could be a challenge. Parental depression and marital insecurity could be linked to decreased parental warmth. Family conflict and divorce is also another factor that could impair child well-being in future and also lessen the warmth that the child receives from both parents. Obviously, domestic violence and parental hostility could also has higher correlation with emotional and behavior issues in children. And positive conflict resolution and co-parenting is something that could be done to buffer all these effects and have open communication with children and co-parent in a way, in a united way to help the children feel the warmth and love from both parents. And so summary of the findings that I looked at during the study was cultural identity is shaped by emotional expression, parenting, and attachment. And culture has a big role in shaping all of those, and migrations and collectivism could influence how love is expressed and received. So something that might be okay in collectivist culture might not be seen in the same light in individualistic culture, and vice versa. And that doesn't make either of them right or wrong. It just the way that is perceived is different from each individual. And gender roles and parenting styles could evolve with acculturation. So coming to the US could make the parents change the way they parent and be more authoritative rather than authoritarian based on their values and the way they want to do the caregiving for their children. Furthermore, collectivist cultures, as I talked about, emphasize on implicit, action-based love. Individualistic culture favor more direct and verbal and physical affection. And implicit versus explicit parenting. So parents express love through their either physical or practice or practical, more supportive behaviors, which are all shaped by cultural norms. And so the theoretical works that I looked at, as I talked about, was attachment theory, power theory, and PDT, which help us explain how parenting and cultural context shape emotional development in children. And lastly, some of the research questions that could emerge for future research that I'll be looking into is how do Armenian Iranian parents express love to their children, and how do children perceive these expressions of love? As well as how do collectivist values interact with Western norms in shaping emotional expressions. And that's all I have for you today. Thank you for listening.
All right, thank you so much, Armin, for that really important presentation that you gave. I love that you represented, an underrepresented population as Iranian Armenians, and defined some terms for us like parental attachment styles, and parenting styles and things like that. So thank you so much. I don't see any questions in the chat at the moment, but again, we can save those all the way at the end. So I encourage our viewers to send over their questions, and we will have those addressed at the end of the presentations. So yeah, last up, we have Anush Guluzian, who will be presenting on intergenerational trauma and somatization symptoms, exploring the legacy of historical trauma in the Armenian American community. So Anush, whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and set up your presentation.
Thank you. Do you see this?
Yes.
Awesome. All right. So hello everyone. My name is Anush, and I'm excited to present on a topic that is both professionally and personally significant to me. Today I'll be discussing my dissertation topic, which explores the link between the intergenerational trauma and somatization symptoms in the Armenian American community. While the study itself is in development, today's focus will be on what the literature tells us and why this research matters. So, what is intergenerational trauma? It refers to psychological effects from traumatic events passed down through generations, negatively impacting descendants' mental and physical health. Ancestral events like war, genocide, displacement, oppression, and natural disasters often initiate this trauma. Understanding this concept helps us recognize how historical events continue to shape present experiences. Descendants experience intergenerational trauma indirectly through survivor narratives, emotional residue, cultural transmission, and inherited family knowledge. So hearing personal stories of trauma, absorbing unspoken emotional pain, internalizing cultural practices formed around historical suffering, and recognizing familial patterns all significantly affect descendants. So these factors collectively perpetuate trauma across generations. How is this transmitted? This form of trauma transmits unconsciously through family communication patterns, learned behaviors, and biological changes. These mechanisms shape parenting styles, attachment patterns, coping strategies, and emotional reactions. Recognizing these transmission channels is crucial for understanding and addressing ongoing trauma cycles. Why is this relevant to the field of psychology? Because it significantly impacts mental health, causing mood disturbances, hyperarousal symptoms, intrusive experiences, social and relational difficulties, and emotional dysregulation. Issues like depression, anxiety, heightened vigilance, isolation, and intense emotional responses are common. These effects illustrate trauma's profound psychological influence on affected individuals and communities. So why is this relevant to the global Armenian population? Armenians have a long history marked by tragic events that continue to impact communities worldwide. But with the 1915 Armenian genocide being the most significant among them. It led to massive loss and displacement, fundamentally reshaping Armenian community structures globally. Research on this topic supports the notion that this historical event has a significant impact on survivors and their descendants. And to top it off, the continued denial by Turkey and minimal global recognition intensifies these emotional wounds and amplifies this trauma. Understanding this historical context clarifies the depth of trauma experienced by Armenian descendants today. So now focusing on what research has shown specifically about the Armenian American population. In regard to the transmission of the trauma, it deeply impacts communities primarily through intimate family stories, habitual behaviors, and ongoing community interactions. These shared experiences stemming from profound loss and unresolved grief associated with the genocide continue to significantly shape the emotional landscape of the Armenian American psyche today. So the collective memory of the genocide acts as a powerful anchor for Armenian identity, promoting a strong sense of unity, cohesiveness, particularly within diasporic communities. In populated regions like LA, Armenian Americans actively engage in cultural, religious, and traditional practices as means of preserving their heritage and resisting assimilation. The research, however, suggests that these practices, while essential for maintaining cultural integrity, simultaneously perpetuate emotional trauma, continually reinforcing and transmitting these deep psychological wounds through the generations. Is there research supporting that intergenerational trauma has contributed to depression and anxiety among Armenian Americans? Yes. Empirical research shows us that Armenian descendants of trauma survivors exhibit significantly higher rates of depression and anxiety and related disorders compared to those with such historical trauma in their family, without such historical trauma in their family backgrounds. Descendants exhibit higher levels of depression and anxiety, especially if their familial communication was with an individual who directly experienced the genocide. But also, indirect contact with trauma, such as hearing about the experiences of relatives or sensing the altered emotional atmosphere within the community, was shown to trigger symptoms associated with depression and anxiety as well. These dynamics highlight the complex ways in which trauma influences not just the survivor, but also those around them, perpetuating that cycle of decline. So moving on to somatization symptoms, what is it? It refers to the expression of psychological distress through physical symptoms. The physical symptoms are not attributed to an identifiable organic pathology, implying the presence of an underlying psychological etiology. In regard to symptoms, it can present as abdominal pain, dyspepsia, chest pain, fatigue, dizziness, insomnia, headaches, muscle weakness, tremors, increased heart rate, hypertension, gastrointestinal discomfort, poor coordination and balance, numbness, tingling sensations, and difficulty with speech and swallowing. It is essential to clarify that when discussing somatic symptoms, I'm not referring to somatic symptom disorder or SSD. Assessing somatization symptoms is notoriously difficult because the symptoms often mimic other physical or psychological conditions. So research shows that up to 2/3 of symptoms presented in primary care settings are left as medically unexplained when physical etiology is not found. Therefore, this study adopted a symptom-focused approach. So we're emphasizing how somatic symptoms indicate psychological distress related to intergenerational trauma, while anxiety and depression symptoms act as mediators. By examining symptoms rather than strict diagnostic criteria, we aim to identify culturally relevant patterns and experiences that might otherwise remain unnoticed and in traditional diagnostic assessments. This approach will allow us to capture meaningful patterns and experiences that might otherwise be missed in strict diagnostic frameworks, especially within culturally diverse populations. So, given the diagnostic challenges, collecting accurate data presents as an even greater obstacle. There is a notable lack of research on minority populations, including ethnic and gender minorities, which limits our full understanding of somatization across diverse groups. That said, the limited peer-reviewed studies that do exist reveal some patterns. For instance, adolescents and young adults often report somatic symptoms influenced and shaped by cultural context, while middle-aged adults show a spike in symptom reports, and then that peak in numbers start to decline in older populations. So gender also plays a role in this, where studies consistently found that females are more likely to report somatic symptoms than males. So if you're wondering, yes, there is research that proves we can physically feel our emotions. A series of experiments were conducted to explore how different emotions are felt in the body, resulting in unique bodily sensation maps associated with various emotions. The study had a total of 773 participants across different cultures, and the results confirmed that emotional experiences are linked to specific patterns of bodily sensations universally. So, like, for example, happiness enhanced sensations all over the body, sadness decreased activity and sensation in the limbs, reflecting a withdrawal or low state of energy. So shifting the focus back to the anxiety and depression, studies have shown that anxiety and depression can significantly impact physical health. Research on anxiety and the physiological response indicated that alteration in bodily functions can occur. So that includes like elevated triglyceride levels, bile acid changes, and decreased vitamin 3 levels, and an increase in liver disease, cardiovascular disease, and bone-related concerns. Similarly, we see that the same results under depression and the impact of physical health. And a big chunk of the research indicated that stress, depression, and anxiety are linked to increased risk of adverse cardiac events, such as heart attacks or sudden cardiac death. So lastly, early psychological distress was shown to often predict lifelong physical health issues, underscoring the critical need for early intervention. And in regards to somatization and the cultural nuances, when it comes to the culture and how we express distress, it's important to note that cultural experiences profoundly shape how individuals perceive and express psychological distress. Research indicated that ethnic minorities and migrant populations facing systematic oppression and societal barriers exhibit higher rates of anxiety and depression, often presenting as somatic symptoms. Another study that focused on the interior insula, a region in the brain that is responsible for processing bodily sensations, showed fluctuating intensity and symptom expression across different cultures. So it is important to recognize that somatization varies across different cultural contexts, requiring culturally sensitive interpretations. And health perceptions also matter. In many cultures, especially those where mental health is heavily stigmatized, people may more likely describe emotional distress through physical symptoms. This means that instead of saying, I feel anxious or overwhelmed, someone might report headaches, chest pain, or fatigue. And let's see. So looking at how migration and cultural adaptation can influence the way psychological distress is expressed. Let me see this. I'm sorry. Just to save us some time, let me briefly go over this. So the research confirms that discrimination and marginalization can contribute to the somatization, particularly within the minority community. Minority groups often face multiple overlapping stressors, such as discrimination, cultural stigma, and historical trauma that can create ongoing psychological distress. When people feel unsafe or stigmatized discussing their mental health, that distress often finds it a way into the body, showing up as physical symptoms. So Mitchell et al. Showed that structural stigma built into institutions and systems can leave a lasting psychological impact, even when explicit acts of discrimination are no longer happening, and that ongoing stress continues to affect mental and physical health. So to begin closing, I want to bring together the key points that have been well established in the literature. Intergenerational trauma is a well-established reality within the Armenian community with its roots in the Armenian genocide. This trauma hasn't just affected the direct survivors, it's been passed down, deeply impacting the emotional and psychological well-being of descendants. The literature shows that this has led to elevated levels of depression and anxiety, which are mental health outcomes commonly found among Armenian Americans. Additionally, we see a strong link between mental health and somatization on its own. Individuals experiencing anxiety and depression often report feeling physical symptoms like chronic pain and fatigue with no clear medical cause. However, even with all this knowledge, there's still a significant research gap in the research. While the connection between intergenerational trauma and somatization is suggested in the literature, what's missing is a focused understanding of how these dynamics specifically play out, and even more specifically, how it plays out in Armenian Americans, and how depression and anxiety may mediate the relationship between trauma and physical symptoms. The goal of the study will be to ask the deeper questions. What are the mechanisms at play? How might intergenerational trauma influence physical symptoms through depression or anxiety? And how is this impacting the Armenian American population? In conclusion, this research matters because it doesn't just fill a gap, it amplifies the experiences of a historically overlooked community and advocates for more informed, compassionate care across both medical and psychological settings, where cultural context is often missing but deeply needed. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Anush, for that wonderful presentation. We will now be taking questions, and we do have a few questions here posed for all of our presenters, but please briefly, if the presenters could answer, for our first group of presenters, we have the question, what are the benefits of increasing mental health literacy and exposure to psychological concepts to an Armenian population? So if you all could briefly comment on this question.
I would say that the benefit is to destigmatize a topic that has been kind of beaten around the bush for many, many years. I think that many struggle behind the scenes and we don't really see it. And with our project and other projects that people do in regards to mental health, it kind of opens the door to talk about it and makes it less of like a taboo topic and more like a regular conversation in our everyday lives.
Thank you so much for that. I believe I was muted. So our second question is for Armen. How might clinicians address enmeshment and setting boundaries in Armenian Iranian families while practicing cultural humility?
I think clinicians should start with showing compassion and validation for the feelings of participants, and also talk about what the client is able to do within their cultural bounds. So look into culturally responsive ways in which the client is able to help themselves, because you cannot change others, you can change yourself in order to be able to change the relationship with you and others. So it's best to look at the ways in which it is culturally okay for the person to do things in order to help themselves.
Thank you for your insight. And our last question is for Anush. Why might Armenians feel more somatic symptoms compared to other populations from individualistic populations?
The research has shown that it's primarily because it might be stigmatized and they don't have the literacy to be able to interpret what they're feeling. So it's all about educating the community and teaching them about the fact that this is what anxiety feels like. This is what depression can feel like physically, and just so that they can be able to identify it. And again, it all comes down to culturally responsive care at the end of the day. So if your physician is not considering why your heart rate might be increased when you've just moved your entire life to another country, then and just writes it off as heart disease instead of considering this huge shift in their life, that's where that culturally responsive care can come into use.
Thank you so much for your insight as well. To our viewers, please remember that at 6:15, we will be starting our panel number 2, Increasing Cooperation Among Armenian Psychology Organizations. So please stay tuned for that. We will be breaking for about 5 minutes for that. And thank you again to all of our presenters. This concludes panel 1.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.